was an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering the 5th season, chapters 4, 5, and 6, brought to you by Ashlynn. In these chapters, we meet a new character called Syenite, and oh god, her whole situation is super gross. It's super gross, and she's trying to make the best of it, and trying to be ambitious, and bless her heart, but it's really, really hard to read. And also what's going on with this little girl feels very pointed, and we are going to talk about it. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Natasha. So I always fall into this trap of thinking that you can get the sense of what a book's tone, or at least like, what's the word I want? The method of storytelling, that you can get a sense of it from the first 3 chapters. And I keep being proven wrong many, many times. And yet I still have this bizarre feeling of security in that I know where we're headed and what's going on usually after the first 3 chapters. Noted exception would be Parable of the Sower, in which I still felt like I didn't know where we were going after chapter 10. But this section is getting a new character, and a new character that feels so important was really surprising to me. And it turns out that there's a good likelihood, I feel like, that either this person will meet the little girl that's heading her way, or that there will be some sort of parallel drawn between what the two of them are going through. Because it turns out that this woman was born feral, as we find out it's called, to parents that did not know what she was and were not themselves orogenes. So I'm just realizing that orogenes sounds like origins. Things that make you say, I feel like maybe that's on purpose. So again, we have the present tense, which it takes getting used to after having, I just had finished reading The Grace of Kings, and so switching over into this was a little bit jarring for my brain. I got into it more easily than I did when I first started, but I still was like, oh, right, I forgot this is like this. So it turns out that the person that is giving her instructions is feldspar. Everybody has been given rock names. Coral reefs are challenging, you realize. Not like ordinary rock. Coral is porous, flexible. The fine control required to shatter it without triggering a tsunami is difficult to achieve. And yet Syenite could do it in her sleep. A two-ringer could do this. A grit could do it, though admittedly not without substantial collateral damage. She reaches for her own cup of safe, turning the wooden hemisphere in her hands so that they will not shake, then taking a sip. I appreciate that you have assigned me a mentor, Senior. No, you don't. Feldspar smiles too, and sips from her cup of safe, ringed pinky finger in the air while she does so. It's as if they're having a private contest, etiquette versus etiquette. Best shit-eating grin takes all. If it's any consolation, no one will think less of you. Because everyone knows what this is really about. That doesn't erase the insult, but it does give Syenite a degree of comfort. At least her new mentor is a 10-ringer. That too is comforting, that they thought so much of her. She'll scrape whatever morsels of self-esteem she can out of this. Oh my god, you guys. There is so much about this writing that feels, and it either is accidentally and still I feel is relevant, or was purposefully meant to line up with the concepts of respectability politics. And the ending paragraph of this chapter, I'm going to read, like, there's little bits of poetry at the end of all of them, and all of them serve as a final, like, point or recap almost in poetry of what we just read, thematically. But this last one is really, like, a lot. So Feldspar, like, it took me a minute to realize that her name, like, not Feldspar, but Syenite, that it was the same name, but shortened. Ordinarily, we'd allow him more time to rest before setting him back on the road, but the Court Governor was insistent that we do something about Alia's harbor blockage as soon as possible. You're the one who'll do the work. He's just there to supervise. Getting there should take a month or so don't make any detours and travel at an easy pace. There's no hurry, given that the coral reef isn't exactly a sudden problem. And I'm trying to find this moment. Okay, right. Fulcrum orogenes must never show anger because it makes the stills nervous. Except Feldspar would never be so improper as to use a slur like the stills. So it turns out that there are slurs in both directions, the stills and ragas. So that's interesting. And the stills, like, that feels like a really, I mean, the stillness is the name of the land that they live in, so the stills doesn't feel quite as insulting. Although I admit, now that I think about it, I don't know where the raga term comes from, what the in-world etymology is of that. But yeah, this whole thing is really Syenite being, like, trying to keep her cool and demonstrate that eventually she will be up to doing Feldspar's job. So the fact that they have to conceal their anger, again, with the parallels with racism, black people aren't allowed to get angry. They just, like, they're a threat immediately. If they are angry, it's interpreted as a direct threat, even if they have every fucking reason, which they almost always do. So that feels like something. Hi. So when do I meet him? Whenever you like. We did send him a briefing and request that he attend this meeting, but it's possible he missed the message since, as I said, he's been recovering from his circuit. 5 ringers and above are no longer required to have a partner or guardian when traveling outside the Fulcrum. Feldspar sips from her cup of safe, oblivious to Syenite's shock, which, that's interesting, and I'm wondering what that's about. At that point, we are judged stable enough in our mastery of orogeny to be granted a modicum of autonomy. 5 rings. She has 4. It's bullshit that this has anything to do with orogenic mastery. If a guardian has doubts about an orogene's willingness to follow the rules, that orogene doesn't make it to the 1st ring, let alone the 5th. So then we get to this moment of, Feldspar pauses for a moment, her face going even more pleasantly unreadable than usual, and that is Syenite's warning. Then Feldspar says, as a 10 ringer, he has the right to refuse any mission short of a declared emergency. You should know that. Wait. Syen's fingers stop turning the cup, and her eyes flick up to meet those of the older woman. Is Feld saying what it sounds like she's saying? Can't be. Syen narrows her eyes, no longer bothering to conceal her suspicion. And yet Feldspar has given her a way out. Why? Feldspar smiles thinly. I have 6 children. Ah, nothing more to be said then. So reminder, I didn't know what was going on in this, so that moment of her saying this and then I have 6 children, I was just totally confused by this whole interaction, right? You know, this doesn't make any sense. But now I know that part of the mission that Syenite's going on is she is supposed to sleep with this guy and produce children that will hopefully be orogenes. And that is like a requirement that neither of them are excited about or interested in. She doesn't even want children in the first place, although she doesn't raise the child. So in some ways that might be a bit of a mercy, because those who do actually want children get their children taken away from them. But it will irrevocably destroy her body. Like, there's no coming back from pregnancy. Like, that just changes you forever. I shouldn't use the word destroy, because that implies that, like, but you are just never the same. Who you were and the way your body used to function, just, it's not the same after. And so basically what it feels like Feldspar is saying here is that if he doesn't want to, you don't have to, because he is the one turning you down and he's allowed. So if he does try to turn you down or seem uninterested, then you have a backdoor to say that I was given that assignment, but he was not amenable to it, I believe is what's going on there, which is pretty significant as we find out. But as much as he seems unwilling at first, he eventually like gives in and does it. And it's just a really awkward scene, but I'll mention this. So safe is nutritious, but it's not a drink anyone enjoys. It's made from a plant milk that changes color in the presence of any contaminant, even spit. It's served to guests at meetings. It's served to guests and at meetings because it's safe. A polite gesture that says, I'm not poisoning you. At least, not right now. So she heads up and we get to see this guy, and we get a little description on the way up of what this area is like. Maine, which is the building that she was in, the administrative building, sits amid a cluster of small buildings at the edge of the sprawling, half-wild expanse that comprises the Ring Garden. The garden is acres wide and runs in a broad strip around the Fulcrum for several miles. It's just that huge, the Fulcrum, a city in itself, nestled within the greater body of Eumenes, like, well, Syenite would have continued the thought with, like a child in a woman's belly, but that comparison seems especially grotesque today. Again, I'm reading that first time, no idea why. I'm like, grotesque, but what? Why? I don't understand. Like, still trying to get it. As if the thought of guardians summons them, Syen spies a few burgundy-uniformed figures standing in a knot near one of the ring's many ponds. There's another guardian on the other side of the pond, lounging in an alcove surrounded by rose bushes, appearing to listen politely while a young junior sings to a small seated audience nearby. Perhaps the guardian is just listening politely. Sometimes they do that. Sometimes they need to relax too. Syen notes this guardian's gaze lingering on one of the audience members in particular, however, a thin, white youth who doesn't seem to be paying much attention to the singer. He's looking at his hands instead, which are folded in his lap. There's a bandage around two of his fingers, holding them together and straight. So then that's our first clue about what winds up happening to Damaya, I believe is her name, right, later on. Which, again, we get all these little like hints, but I'm not picking up on them. I'm not realizing what's important and what's not quite yet. Her roommates aren't home to see her fetch a few necessary items from her chest, for which she is painfully grateful. They'll hear about her assignment soon enough through the rumor mill. And then we get the bit about her being really ambitious, that she does want Feldspar's job, and this moment of taking the wide stairways gradually, pausing now and again to appreciate the artfully arranged patterns of light and shadow cast by the narrow windows. She's not sure what makes the patterns so special, actually, but everyone says they're stunning works of art, so she needs to be seen appreciating. Yo, that's a lot. Like, I just really, that had a very Black Mirror-esque sort of vibe to it to me. I don't know if anyone listening to this has watched Black Mirror, but there's a lot of like concern about reputation and appearance and the impression that you're giving to people around you in various different stories. And one of the more recent ones that I covered for the beginning of season 3 is about kind of like Instagram culture and the idea of rating people and giving them stars in response to like in-person behavior versus starring like posts on Facebook or something. And this feels like the kind of thing that would have been in that episode where she stops to appreciate the art so that she can get a 5-star review from somebody who's passing by and sees her really getting it, you know? So she gets up to his rooms and realizes that he's like totally by himself up here, like really has actual privacy that she has never had, and takes a moment before she goes up to his door and knocks to just appreciate how quiet it is, because being by herself is simply not something that she's afforded. So he is a man who has been powerless most of his life, only lately granted autonomy and privilege over others. No one will demote him for anything so trivial as perversion or abuse, not if his victim is just another orogene. So she's, again, giving a hint about the perversion, and I'm thinking, like, when she's meeting with this guy, and it's natural just as a woman to be nervous meeting a strange man on his territory, on his turf. Like, whether or not she's meeting him for sex here specifically, that's just going to be something that's on your mind. So I'm still not thinking of this as what it is. So he comes to the door, and he is only about 40 years old, which she's shocked by, because many of the people who are at 6th and 7th rings are in their 70s. So the fact that he's at 10 rings at the age of 40 is so startling to her that it like kind of makes her speechless for a second. And he keeps asking her, what? And he finally says, and I love the way that the swears work in this world, what in the name of every 2-minute earth jerk? And then later, I told Feldspar and those other cackling meddlers on the senior advisory board to leave me alone. I'm going to ice you where I stand. Not orders exactly, she manages, and his face twists. Then I don't want to hear whatever you're here to tell me. Go the rust away. Go the rust away. I know that that's been used earlier this book, but it really got to me this time because of this guy in particular using it. She can't believe it at first. What kind of... Really? It is indignity on top of indignity. Bad enough to have to do this in the first place, but to be disrespected in the process? He inhales to start shouting, and she has no idea what he's about to shout, but she doesn't want to hear it. And before he can, she snaps, I'm here to fuck you, Earth burn it. Is that worth disturbing your beauty rest? Part of her is appalled at her own language and her own anger. The rest of her is satisfied because that shuts him right the rust up. Ha. So, the fact that he gets back and is immediately being sent to breed, he just didn't expect. So that's part of it, is that he's so startled that they're doing this right away, because he's only been back a few hours. But also the way that she spoke to him. Then this isn't the first time for you, Syenite says. No, but I didn't always know. With the first few women, I thought they were interested. Oh, bless him. What a sweet little cinnamon roll. He just wants ladies to like him, and he thought that they did. And when he sees her looking at him like, are you fucking serious? He's like, I know. So she finally says, if you'd rather, you can just lie still and let me take care of things. It's fine. She gets her uniform jacket off, then pulls something out of the pocket to show him. A bottle of lubricant, still mostly full. He looks dimly horrified. In fact, it's probably better if you don't move. This will be awkward enough as it is. He stands up, actually backing away. The look of agitation on his face is, well, it's not funny, not really, but Syenite cannot help feeling a modicum of relief at his reaction. No, not just relief. He is the weak one here, despite his 10 rings. She's the one who has to carry a child she doesn't want, which might kill her, and even if it doesn't, will change her body forever, if not her life. But here and now, at least, she is the one with all the power. It makes this, well, not right, but better somehow, that she's the one in control. We don't have to do this, he blurts. I can refuse. I know you can, but I can, so don't refuse. What? Why not? You said it. I have to do this. You don't. If not you, it'll be someone else. 6 children Feldspar had, but Feldspar was never a particularly promising orogene. Syenite is. If Syen isn't careful, if she pisses off the wrong people, if she lets herself get labeled difficult, they will kill her career and assign her permanently to the Fulcrum, leaving her nothing to do but lie on her back and turn men's grunting and farting into babies. She'll be lucky to have only 6, if that's how things turn out. Oh, God. Guys, this is it's so much worse for black women, but it is definitely something that many women encounter, which is just the idea of being labeled difficult at the workplace because of being treated like shit and standing up for yourself. And that turning, of course there's, non-retaliation policies in place and whatever in a lot of these places. This doesn't amount to anything, especially if everybody doesn't like you, even the people in HR, who's going to fucking stand up for you besides you. So that was a little bit too much reality right there. So he finally says over with when she's like, I just want to get this over with. He repeats it back. And he then asks her if she was born here and says that he was bred to order, not even as haphazardly as our child will be. I'm the product of 2 of the Fulcrum's oldest and most promising lineages, or so I'm told. I had a guardian practically from birth. You're a feral. And this is the first time that she has ever heard this term. The ones from outside often don't know or care, but when an orogene is born from parents who weren't, from a family line that's never shown the curse before, that's how they think of you. A wild mutt to my domesticated purebred. An accident to my plan. What it actually means is that they couldn't predict you. You're the proof that they'll never understand orogeny. It's not science, it's something else. And they'll never control us. Not really. Not completely. And she starts to think back at the way that she's been treated and realizes oh yeah, they have been real weird around me. And I assumed it was just because I was from a different part of the world than them. And that, for whatever reason, my race is considered somewhat inferior. But it's because of who she is and how she came to be. It's somewhat flattering to think that despite her feral status, they actually want something of her infused into their breeding lines. Then she wonders why a part of her is trying to find value in degradation. So many parallels, guys. Oh my God, finding value in degradation. Yo, this is respectability politics again. And I really want to preface everything that I'm saying about black women's experiences with the obvious caveat that I am not a fucking black woman, so I do not know the way obviously a woman who has experienced it would know. But I listen and I read and I hear my friends and I investigate what black women are writing and saying. And the idea of being valued for something in a certain way and then realizing that part of it is that you're being degraded is just as much of a real experience with black women, because there's this idea of being the right sort of woman. And if you are doing the ideal woman's, if you're showing that behavior, you get treated with more respect. If you're more modest, if you're more submissive, if you're more obliging, you are treated as if you have more value. But in doing that, you are degrading yourself. But you do get treated as if you are better. And that's part of internalized misogyny, is women who believe the bullshit about what makes certain women worth something and others not. They buy into that garbage. And they are trying to find value in degradation. And it's a great sentence. And on my Kindle, it shows if there's something that's been highlighted by a lot of people. And this one has been highlighted 663 times. So that, yeah, it deserves it. So she finally just gets on top of him and they go at it and she finishes and gets up. And then he asks what her name was. And when she tells him Syenite, he says, "That's the name your parents gave you? Sorry, just jealous. Jealous? Fulcrum bred, remember? I've only ever had one name. You can call me... She cuts him off because she knows his name already, and anyway, she doesn't intend on calling him anything but you, which should be enough to distinguish him from their horses. Feldspar says we're to leave for Alia tomorrow. Another mission already? So, when she mentions the coral, he's like, oh, cool, good. He knows it's a bullshit mission, and there's only one reason they'd send him along for something like this. Which, I don't know if that's about the babies and the mating, or if that's something else. So they agreed to meet at noon. And as she leaves, she's thinking about that being civilized means doing what her betters say she should for the good of all. It's not like she gains no benefit from this. A year or so of discomfort, a baby she doesn't have to bother raising because it will be turned over to the lower creche as soon as it's born, and a high-profile mission completed under the mentorship of a powerful senior. With the experience and boost to her reputation, she'll be that much closer to her 5th ring. That means her own apartment, no more roommates, and better missions, longer leave, more say in her own life. That's worth it. Yeah, is it though? And then this is the end of the, and I'm gonna cry. I know I'm gonna cry as I read this, so just bear with me, guys. Tell them they can be great someday, like us. Tell them they belong among us, no matter how we treat them. Tell them they must earn the respect which everyone else receives by default. Tell them there is a standard for acceptance. That standard is simply perfection. Kill those who scoff at these contradictions, and tell the rest that the dead deserved annihilation for their weakness and doubt. Then they'll break themselves trying for what they'll never achieve. Hi! That's brutal. Hello. Jesus Christ. Oh, okay. Getting it together again. So we go back to the you. Where you are running away and trying to find the husband that beat your child to death. And we get a little bit of insight into the way that power flows. As you are walking around, power in, power out. To keep the power in, though, to not turn the valley's aquifer into a geyser or shatter the ground into rubble, takes an effort that makes your teeth and the backs of your eyes ache. You walked a long time to try to burn off some of what you took in, but it still brims under your skin, even as your body grows weary and your feet hurt. You are a weapon meant to move mountains. A mere walk can't take that out of you. So, again, I had sort of said in the beginning that I thought maybe the power that this one guy had that shattered things in the prologue was unusual, but it appears not. So that kind of power is just standard, and you just have to learn to live with it, which is crazy. So she's walking, and she decides that she is, and I'm saying she instead of you because that just really is hard for me to keep in mind. She's walking, and she reaches an area where she can light a fire if she wants, but decides that she doesn't want to attract the attention, that it will give her warmth, but it will also bring risk. And you've eaten something from your pack, quiche bread smeared with salty akaba paste from the jar you stuffed into it a lifetime and a family ago. Akaba keeps well after it's opened, but not forever, and now that you've opened it, you'll have to eat it for the next few meals until it's gone. That's okay, because you like it. You've drunk water from the canteen that you filled a few miles back at a roadhouse's well pump. There'd been people there, several dozen, some of them camping around the roadhouse, and some of them just stopping there briefly. All of them had the look you're starting to identify as slow-building panic. because everyone's finally begun to realize what the shake and the red glow and the clouded sky all mean. And to be outside of a community's gates at a time like this, in the long run, is a death sentence, except for a handful who are willing to become brutal enough or depraved enough to do what they must. And even those only have a chance at survival. So yeah, she's walking through these areas and there are just people like covered in dirt with injuries, like crying because somebody got killed in the wreckage. Like, she's walking through a disaster zone, you know. I was not mentally ready for that, although I should have been, because I guess I expected a lot of the areas that she walked through to not be inhabited. I thought that everybody lived in communities, that was just how it was done. And that if you lived out, like, that the idea of living outside of one was like sort of you agreeing that you were going to die, like, you know, slow suicide. But evidently, if things are stable for a little while, people begin to spread out and outside of the communities. And then things like this happen and they kind of wish they hadn't. So she's sitting next to this fence with her back up against it, and she's going to fall asleep there. And she senses somebody near her and starts to draw power to defend herself, and then realize that it's a little boy. And he's maybe 6 or 7 years old, and he says hello to her. And when she asks where he came from, he shrugs and says, "I'm Hoa." She describes him as you wonder if he's from an eastern coastal column. He's dark, but his hair moves a little when the wind soughs again. That word is so weird to me. And you can tell that some of it's straight as the grass around you. West Coaster, then? The rest of it seems stuck down with hair pomade or something. No, you're a mother. It's dirt. He's covered in dirt. He sits in a hunched way that would look odd in an adult and is perfectly normal for a child who hasn't been told to sit up straight. Is this the stone boy? I'm curious. He asks her if he can sleep here, and she asks him who else is with him, and he says nobody. Really, it's just me. I saw some other people by the road, but I didn't like them. I hid from them. I like you. So she gives him the bedroll to sleep on, and rather than like get into it and, you know, use it as a blanket also, he just lays on top of it, which she finds really weird, but it's just kind of like, well, all right. And then the ash begins to fall in the morning. Is the end of that section. So yeah, I just feel like this has got to be the stone boy. And he is attracted to her because she's an orogene. He didn't like them, but he likes her. I feel like that's got to be it. So then we go to Damaya. I added another syllable when I said her name earlier. I said Damayama. It's Damaya. So here comes probably for me the most upsetting part of this so far, because I didn't pick up on the fact that Shafa is basically like colonialism and white oppression, but that's 100% what he is. He is benevolent racism, but there's like this like that word benevolence is way too generous, but you know what I'm saying? Like, it's disguised as for your own good, for the good of everyone. And it's hugely cruel and horrific and just like so hard to read. Oh God. So in the middle of the night, she wakes to hear Shafa groaning and thrashing in his sleep. If it's a nightmare, it's a terrible one, and for a while she wonders if she should get up and try to wake him. She hates nightmares, but Shafa's a grown-up, and grown-ups need their sleep. He's the only person who cares about her in all the world, so she lies there, anxious and undecided, until he actually cries out something unintelligible, and it sounds like he's dying. "Are you awake?" She says it really softly, because obviously he isn't, but the instant she speaks, he is. And she just tells him that he was snoring and he falls asleep again. But I feel like there's some significance to this nightmare, and I don't know what that is. So they ride through these towns, and she's realizing that as big and beautiful and intimidating as these towns are, it's just a bigger version of every place that she lived. They're all doing the same chores. There are like recognizable attitudes in all of the different people, and there's just a real feel to it of like kind of growing up mentally. And as she realizes that everywhere you go, you encounter the same type of people and type of life. So let's see. Old Father Earth does feel closer here than in Palela. Or not closer, that's not really the word for it, but she doesn't know what word would work better. Easier to touch, maybe, if she were to do so. And it feels fragile somehow, the land all around them, like an eggshell laced with fine lines that can barely be seen, but which still spell imminent death for the chick inside. And he tells her to stop because he can tell that she is listening to the earth. And she doesn't know how he can tell, but he definitely can. And he says that she is untrained and that he shouldn't really expect her to be able to do better. But right now, you're dry tinder and we're traveling past a roaring fire that's kicking up sparks. Would a story help? So he tells her this story about how, and this I found fascinating, mostly because it gives us some, okay, there's a couple things. We find out that kinetic energy is part of what orogenes draw on for their power. So this is about like somebody who is an orogene out of control, destroying cities and killing hundreds of people. And that in order to defeat him, they burned down the city before he got there and then put out all of the fires and made sure everything was like wet and soggy, and that there was not enough stone and there was just not enough nearby for them to draw on, and that they were able to kill this guy. I'm going to read a couple little sections that I highlighted. He had superb control, which Miss Alem promptly used to kill every living soul in several towns and cities, and even a few calmless warrens, thousands of people in all. Damaya inhales, horrified. It has never occurred to her that Raga's... She stops herself. She is a Raga. All at once, she does not like the word, which she has heard most of her life. It's a bad word she's not supposed to say, even though the grown-ups toss it around freely. And suddenly, it seems uglier than it already did. It's terrible to know that orogenes can kill so many so easily, but then she supposes that's why people hate them. Her. That is why people hate her. So, they continue on with this, the story. He was with a woman, his bodyguard, Shemshana. She was a renowned fighter. They cut down the trees, shrubs, burned them, burned the houses, doused the fires to leave cold, wet ash. That is the nature of your power. Kinetic transference. Sessunal catalysis, which I do not know what that means. I meant to look that up. One does not move a mountain by will alone. Some of the strength you need when you finally learn how to use your power properly will come from within you. Most of it, however, must come from elsewhere. If the earth is already moving, or if the fire under the earth is at or near the surface, you may use that strength. You are meant to use that strength. When Father Earth stirs, he unleashes so much raw power that taking some of it does no harm to you or anyone else. The air doesn't turn cold? No one dies? She feels him nod. Not when you use earth power, no. But of course, Father Earth never moves when one wishes. When there is no earth power nearby, an orogene can still make the earth move, but only by taking the necessary heat and force and motion from the things around her. Anything that moves or has warmth. Campfires, water, the air, even rocks, and of course, living things. So, he finishes it. He didn't know what Shemshana had done until he got to Eumenes? No, he didn't know. The burning was done by the time he arrived. Syenite flung a glass knife over and over into the torus of his power. It didn't kill him, but it distracted him enough to break his orogeny, and then Syenite took care of the rest with her other knife. Thus was ended old Sanze Empire's, the Sanzed equatorial affiliation's greatest threat. So she says, I liked that story, and he replies, that was the origin of the Guardians, you know. As the Fulcrum is an order of orogenes, we are the order that watches the Fulcrum. For we know, as Syenite did, that despite all your terrible power, you are not invincible. You can be beaten. And then she starts to realize that she is not Syenite, the heroine of that story. She is the bad guy. We train as Syenite did. We learn how orogenic power works, and we find ways to use this knowledge against you. We watch for those among your kind who might become the next Misalems, and we eliminate them. The rest we take care of. He leans over to smile at her again, but Damaya does not smile back this time. I am your guardian now, and it is my duty to make certain you remain helpful, never harmful. So then, he breaks her hand. Guys, when he says that he is there to help control her, she says, I don't want to be controlled. I want to be responsible for myself. And he says that, but you can't control yourself. It's not your nature. The plain fact of the matter is that you're like lightning, dangerous unless captured in wires. You're fire, a warm light on a cold, dark night to be sure, but also a conflagration that can destroy everything in its path. I won't destroy anybody. I'm not bad like that. And I can control myself. Shafa reins in the horse to a snorting halt. Can you really? What? Control yourself. It's an important question. The most important, really. Can you? I don't. So he puts his hand over her hand, and he just straight up tells her, I am going to break your hand. And he does it. And he does it and makes her breathe through it and not draw power to calm the pain or hurt him in retaliation. You could kill me, Shafa says into her ear, and despite everything, she falls silent to hear him. Reach for the fire within the earth, or suck the strength from everything around you. I sit within your torus. This is a bad place for orogeny, given that you have no training. One mistake, and you'll shift the fault beneath us and trigger quite the shake. That might kill you, too, but if you manage to survive, you'll be free. Find some calm somewhere, beg your way in, join a pack of calmless, and get along as best you can. You can hide what you are if you're clever for a while. It never lasts, and it will be an illusion. But for a time, you can feel normal. I know you want that more than anything. Your hand is broken in at least 3 places. If it's splinted and if you take care, it can probably heal with no permanent damage. If I crush it, however, no! Never say no to me, he says. The words are hot against her skin. Orogenes have no right to say no. I am your guardian. I will break every bone in your hand, every bone in your body, if I deem it necessary to make the world safe from you. Y'all, and then finally, Shafa keeps stroking her broken hand. I love you, he says. She flinches, and he soothes her with a soft shush in her ear while his thumbs keep stroking the hand he's broken. Never doubt that I do, little one. Poor creature locked in a barn, so afraid of herself that she hardly dares speak. And yet there is the fire of wit in you along with the fire of the earth, and I cannot help but admire both, however evil the latter might be. I hate doing this to you. I hate that it's necessary, but please understand, I have hurt you so that you will hurt no one else. You need to know that I will never lie to you. Look under your arm. It is one thing to resist a reflex, another altogether to resist the conscious, deliberate desire to kill another person for self-defense or any other reason. He had a knife to her side the entire time, so that if she began to draw power, he could just kill her. This was a test, for her life, and she had no idea. And so, he realigns the bones in her hand, and of course she, practically passes out with the pain. And they ride on until they stop and make camp. And she finally says that she wants to go home. And he says, well, you don't have one yet. You will, but you don't have one anymore. And you'll have new friends and teachers and a new life. Do you fear me? He asks. Yes. Good. You should. I'm not sorry for the pain I've caused you, little one, because you needed to learn the lesson of that pain. What do you understand about me now? I have to do what you'll say, or you'll hurt me. And she closed her eyes tighter. In dreams, that makes the bad creatures go away. And, she adds, you'll hurt me even when I do obey. If you think you should. Yes. What I do is not random. It's about control. Give me no reason to doubt yours, and I will never hurt you again. Do you understand? He's the only person left whom she can love. So she nods and closes her eyes again and relaxes beside him. Good night, Shafa. Guys, is this heavy-handed? Well, maybe. I would say no, actually, though. I feel like it only could seem heavy-handed if you really know what she's talking about here. But if you're not super aware of the parallels, then no. And unfortunately, many Americans will not be super aware of the parallels because many Americans just want to pretend racism isn't a thing. And that we're, past that now. You will hurt me even if I do obey, if that's what you think you need to do. Y'all, that says it. I want your absolute obedience, and even when I get it, I may hurt you anyway. Just because I feel like that's what needs to happen. Imagine functioning like that in the world. Imagine being someone that knows that that applies to them. I can't wrap my head around it. And the fact that he's the only one who loves her anymore, because he claims to. Of course, that's not love, but she doesn't know that because she's a child and she has nobody and she needs to believe that somebody loves her. He makes her believe that this is for her own good. And you know what's so upsetting is that he may not even be wrong about that because of the world that she lives in. It may be for her own good because everybody is terrible. But this whole moment of, I'm going to hurt you and see if you will just take it. That is a thing that's breaking someone, basically. That's a tale as old as time, right? And that was most definitely something that was done to slaves. Breaking. Making sure that you can get absolute obedience out of somebody who previously had been rebellious or defiant or whatever. And Jesus Christ, it's just so heart-wrenching to see this little girl get put in this position. Ashlynn says, I was going to ask you if you think he's wrong. You've seen what they can do. Now, see, that's a good point because, obviously racism, it's like this weird idea that people of a different color have a whole different set of like priorities and abilities than white people. Like there's, just this mythology that goes along with that. But this situation, this girl can actually do things to completely disrupt the planet. So, that's why I think the author uses the second person for the one story, to make it the reader and not someone else. Yeah, I think you're probably right about that. So do I think he's wrong? I don't want to say, I want to say that I do understand the fear that people have of these folks. But I also want to say that there's a good chance that we have like a X-Men situation on our hands here, where this is the future of that planet. Orogenes are going to be the majority race at some point. I feel like this is a bunch of normie human beings trying to fight to remain top dog, and it's a losing battle because they simply don't have the power that the others have. And they are able to keep them in check right now, but that it's going to start to get out of hand. It's similar to, like, even though there are fewer in number of them right now, their power so outstrips the stills that it's sort of like the situation that you have like here in the United States where, yeah, the people in power have like far more money and resources, but there are way fewer of them than the average American. So if we wanted to like overthrow and run things, we could do it, but we just don't because we're so ruled. This is a difference in that the numbers are inverted, but the power is being handled the same way, where the people who really, like, in a practical sense, have less power are the ones that are in power right now, and that they could be overturned and overthrown, but the folks that actually have the power are held so well in check and so effectively and so afraid of themselves that they do not take advantage of the opportunities that they have to just kind of fuck shit up. God, it's just, man, it was hard to read. It was really hard to read. And this poor girl. And it's sort of reassuring, that first chapter with Syenite, who, despite that she's been in the Fulcrum for a while, and despite that she has like ambitions within the Fulcrum, she is still bubbling with anger. And I'm just hopeful that Damaya does not lose hers and that she doesn't become completely cowed. I want her to stay angry because I feel like as much as they're afraid of anger, guess what? When you enslave people, that tends to make them angry. Yeah, this is really intense. I really need to get Rashawn to read this. I really do. Power to shift the entire planet. Like, you've seen what they can do. You're right, Ashlynn. And that's exactly it. They can. But none of them wants to do that. They would like to be able to control themselves. So being taught self-control, if it were done in a different way, would probably be welcome to most of them. But instead of being treated as people who like have, their own conscience and care, it seems like they're just being treated like they're wild animals. But at the beginning of the book, one of them does. Yes, but that one is like, I'm freeing them from slavery. So, and they are correct. And I'm going to draw another parallel with like, the majority people in the United States. Do we want to be hurting people? No. But it gets to a point that y'all are hurting us plenty. And so it is self-defense after a point. We're trying to make it so that other people can live. And you can only push folks so far before they start to fight back for their own autonomy, you know? So, and he's with a stone woman. So I'm curious about what the deal is with the stone people teaming up with the orogenes. If that's a thing. And who is this weirdo little boy that is with us at the campsite? Yeah, this is just such a weird, what a strange story. I really like it. And I'm very curious, like, where the second person you point of view is going to wind up, because I really don't know what that's all about. And I'm really curious about the person who, like, in the prologue fucked shit up. I thought that he was in the city of Eumenes, and sounds like they're saying that's also where the Fulcrum is. So I guess the Fulcrum is still intact because there are so many orogenes that they were able to, like, hold off the attack. But I'm not clear on the timing of that, so I'm not sure. But so maybe the Fulcrum's like this sort of preserved bit of beautiful gardens and buildings in the middle of, like, a complete wasteland. Or perhaps even though he did launch the attack from Eumenes, its effects are only being seen distantly right now. I don't know. But yeah, so I have to wrap this up. I have another recording on Iron Druid a little bit later today. So thank you very much, Ashlynn, for commissioning this. This was really good. And I'm going to really, really try and convince Rashawn to read it, because I feel like she'll get a lot out of it. And I hope that you guys all pick it up and check it out too, because there's a lot, like, I'm honestly skipping so much that I feel is pretty significant in order to be able to talk about it within time. But reading it, I feel like you would get a lot more. So please, please check this book out if you can. And hopefully I will see you all soon with a new episode. Toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.